My son is going to be 18 years old soon, like in actually 2.5 months. And one time he told me something that really struck and hit home. He said, Mom, I remember that when I was a child, all the other moms were picking up their kids, and you never came to pick me up from daycare. And it hit me really hard when he said that. And it kind of reminded me that I used to think that if I worked hard enough, if I checked all the right boxes, like I had a leadership role, happy family, I would feel successful. But eventually, what happened that I was really exhausted. I was stretched really thin always between work, family, expectations. And, my son remembers that I never picked him up from daycare. So if you're kind of nodding along now, you feel like maybe similarly that, you're just trying to balance too much. So I want to share that you're not the only one. I mean, I've been there. And I really want to introduce the guest that I'm speaking with today. So Jo Stone knows this feeling all too well. She had a prestigious title, a dream house, and the executive board seat. But inside, she was completely drained, and she did what most people would never dare to do. She left it all behind. And through that journey, she discovered something powerful, that most leadership programs don't actually teach women what they really need in order to succeed. So, hi everyone, and welcome to From a Woman to a Leader. This is the podcast where we talk about what it really takes for women to thrive in leadership and build careers on their terms. And for those who don't know me, my name is Limor Bergman Gross. I'm a leadership coach for women in tech, and I've been where you are, balancing ambitions that I had with life demands and navigating tough career decisions, figuring out how to own my voice in a male-dominant industry. And in this episode, Jo and I dive into the real reason high-achieving women burn out and why traditional leadership programs miss the mark. We unpack the hidden forces holding women back: perfectionism, people-pleasing, and procrastination. More importantly, Jo shares how to break free from those patterns and build a leadership identity rooted in confidence, boundaries, and true influence, not just doing more work. I wish I knew that, when over 20 years ago, when I was just in the beginning of my career and beginning of starting my family. So if you ever felt like you're running on empty, constantly you need to prove yourself, and you're struggling to set boundaries, this conversation will change the way you think about success. So, are you ready? Stay with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe and share this episode and this podcast with any woman that needs to hear this message. And let's dive right in. Hi, Jo. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And I really enjoy having incredible women all around the world. And today, Sydney, Australia.
Yes, that's right. Heading into summer here, a nice hot one. And always nice to have that international perspective, even if we are many people on the bottom of the world.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe we'll start talking about you and your journey. I know that you've been a CMO and you moved into coaching. So can you kind of share a little bit about that and what was the turning point for you deciding to leave corporate?
Yeah, sure. I was in corporate for 20 years. and rose up the ranks relatively quickly. So I got my first head of marketing role at 28 and my first chief role at 32. And at that time, I had two young kids. So I had a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. And yeah, I just found that I was traveling a lot. I had an Asia Pacific role. So I was in Hong Kong, New Zealand, Singapore very regularly. And that can be challenging when you're juggling little children. My husband had some mental health challenges at the time, so he wasn't working. He was sort of in and out of work. So being the breadwinner and being that role as leader where so much is on the line can be a lot of pressure. But the irony is that I probably put more pressure on myself than anybody else ever put on me, like many women. And I reached this point in my career where I had the chief in my title. I was on a not-for-profit board, which was another sort of executive goal of mine. The great Australian dream is often to build your own house. So I had built and designed my own house. I had 2 new cars in the driveway, and on the surface, I thought I had it all. That was everything that I supposedly ever wanted. And yet on the inside, I was constantly exhausted. I was running. I was late. It felt like to everything, always behind, and never really present wherever I was. So whether I was at home with the kids, skipping pages in the bedtime story, in a rush to get back onto the laptop to get back to Hong Kong about what they needed before they closed for the day, or putting kids to bed and waiting for a 10 p.m. meeting with London. So I just remember thinking there's something missing. Like this was meant to be it, and it's meant to feel better.
Yeah.
And so I went on this journey, like many women do, of effectively burning out, and ended up leaving my job. I ended up essentially what I call blowing up my life. So I realized that it's maybe I need to change everything. I dreamt of moving to the country, of packing in the life of keeping up with the Joneses, as we say. And so I left my job, went to start my own business. I sold my dream house after only 18 months. Relationship almost ended up breaking down, and thought, okay, well this is going to solve everything. I'll change all my circumstances. And yet, on the other side of that, I realized that the problem was still me. The problem wasn't the job. The problem wasn't the house. It wasn't even the relationship. It was that I didn't really know what my own measures of success were. I didn't know how to make myself happy, and I didn't really know how to have it all instead of doing it all. And so
Yeah.
that was when I started my coaching business, by, I guess, lots of knocks from the universe. And here we are now, 5 years later, and hundreds of women through sort of the program and frameworks that I built on that journey for me to rediscover how do I overcome all that conditioning I had? How do I redefine success on my terms and build a life where I get to have what I want, but also have energy and be present and have the joy that I want to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe, for sharing. And I think that one of the challenges is that we define success, or we think that success is what others expect us
Mm-hmm.
to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, what kind of helped you figure out what you wanted and what success looked like to you?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I found that I was very much along this sort of line of success that we've been taught, have the nice house, have the big job, have the role, have the responsibility. And when you get all of those things, they will make you happy. But it was almost as if I climbed to the top of a mountain that everybody told me is what I should be doing. And I subscribed to that. I mean, if you'd have said to me, I'll bet you $1 million this is what you want, hand on heart, I would have said it was. But
Yeah.
I was constantly looking outside myself for that validation. Yes, I'm ambitious and had big goals and dreams, but I had almost abandoned myself in the process of that. I'd forgotten who I was. I'd contorted myself and become such a chameleon to play all the roles in my life, all the labels, that I'd completely lost touch with what made me me, what brought me joy. And so I had to go on this really quite arduous and long journey of working out, who am I? How do I be authentic to who I am? And what is it that I really want, not think I want or should want or society tells me I want? What really is actually going to make me and uniquely me happy? And that was almost when I was sort of standing on top of the mountain looking around at, the one that I was told to climb, or conditioned to climb and praised for climbing. You climb those mountains, you get the pay rises, you get the financial security,
Yeah.
and so you get lots of validation that this is good, keep going. And it was confronting to a lot of people in my network when I blew it all up. because like, no, you can't do that. That's not how we roll.
Yeah.
You're making them sit through all their own insecurities at the same time.
I very much relate with you, Joe, because I've been in a similar situation and everyone looks at me like, are you crazy? Like, why are you leaving all of that? So you decided just to leave everything?
Yeah, so I sold my house first, and then I left my
Mm-hmm.
job,
Mm-hmm.
and then started up I was never planning to be a coach at all. I was planning on being a consultant in marketing or customer experience or more of my corporate field. I thought at the time that coaches wore flower garlands and danced to the moon in hippie skirts, and I wasn't one of those. I was a consultant, used to boardrooms and post-it notes and, black high heels and suits. That was my view. I had a lot of prejudice and bias as to how a coach should look and judgments on that. So yeah, I left my job, I sold my house, and selling the house gave me the more of the financial freedom. So I downsized. I'd gone through this journey of upsizing with the big mortgage and everything, and then I downsized and got myself more financial freedom, which allowed me to quit my job. That was the problem. I was in a job that wasn't the right fit for me at the time, but I had such a big mortgage and such big outgoings that I couldn't afford to leave it, because finding jobs at that level can be really tricky. So it's this horrible feeling of being trapped and being stuck. And yet on the outside, everyone's, oh, you're so successful and you're doing so well. And you're like, really? It doesn't feel like it. So yeah, so I bought myself that freedom and that flexibility, and then quit my job and started my business and started off consulting, and probably did that for around a year with various telecommunications companies, financial services companies, more of my sort of blue chip bread and butter, where I'd spent a lot of my corporate time. And then the coaching stuff started unraveling accidentally. I'd be with my corporate clients who were, I was doing more marketing or customer experience consulting at the time, sort of growth and strategy and innovation. And I'd be sitting down with my head of customer service or my head of sales or my head of people, who was my client. And we'd be having coffee over, the latest strategy paper or my recommendations. And they'd say, yeah, Joe, this is all well and good, but I'm feeling so burnt out. How do I do this? What am I doing wrong? And they were racked with imposter syndrome and perfectionism and all these traits that I now know are the fundamentals of what keep women stuck. So I was able to really leverage one of my skill sets in corporate, and really throughout my whole life, is I'm able to often look at something and pull it apart and put it back together again in a way that makes sense. And so I did that to my life. I pulled it apart, and I've got so many leadership frameworks. I've been on every high potential program and been to every offsite, spent those 5 days with psychologists. And so I had so much self-awareness and models and frameworks. I pulled it all apart and said, which ones actually work? Because so many don't often work when you're juggling kids, and it's, turn the laptop at 5 and, hold that boundary. And like, well, I have a meeting with Hong Kong at 6 and I need to prepare for that. So a lot of the advice I was getting just didn't land. And the advice was all around, well, step back. Why are you so ambitious? You don't have to work so hard. Go part-time. Why take that promotion? But that was not aligned with who I was. I have ambition. My career is a really important part of who I am. And to deny that side of myself didn't feel right, because I knew that wouldn't make me happy either. I was at home for 9 months when I had my first daughter, and by the end I was itching to go back to work. I loved the time with her, but I was done. I was ready to go back to work and fulfill that other side of me.
Yeah, I want to say something before we go in and talk about leadership programs, and because we are so conditioned to kind of satisfy everyone else. I remember when I have 4 children, and every time I went to maternity leave, I felt like I have to go back. I'm not a kind of person that can stay at home with babies for too long. I go crazy. But there is something around society that expects, oh, you're a mother now, so you should actually spend some time with your babies, and what is right, what is wrong. And well, not everyone is the same.
No, no, and it can be really hard to buck that convention. My husband and I found at the time, I took 7 months off with my second, and then my husband became primary carer. So he basically went either part-time or then finished up working. But yeah, the judgment, I mean, when I had my second, my company was going through a hostile takeover. So we were the biggest acquisition of 2013 in Australia. And so I am there with a 2-week-old baby in the boardroom consulting back to my company on parental leave with a 2-week-old baby and full of a room full of 60, 70, 80-year-old men looking at
Hmm.
me like, what is she doing here? I'm like, well, you wanted my advice. I come with the baby because she's 2 weeks old and I can't leave that behind. So,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of judgment from other mums, like, you can't do that. And I said, well, I'm still spending time with her. Of course, I'm charging my employer parental leave, but I'm charging my employer consulting rates to be here. So don't think I'm not benefiting from this financially as well, because I was strong enough to say, I'm on parental leave. And I said, we're paying you on parental leave. I said, yes, and I'm meant to be at home with my baby. You want me in that boardroom? This is what that's going to cost you. And they paid whatever I asked because they knew that they couldn't get that advice elsewhere. But
Yeah.
I was in there for a couple of hours, a couple of times a week, and I loved it. There was no resentment. That was my choice. But you have to learn to really embrace your own path, whatever that is. And if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, that's awesome. If you want to work 3 days a week, that's awesome. If you want to work 5 days a week, that's awesome. We need to put down these expectations of what makes a good mother or a good parent and actually embrace what is right for each individual and each family circumstance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess the message I want to give to our listeners is that you should really spend some time thinking of what you want and how you want your life to look like, both personally and professionally, right? And uh, ask yourself, is this really what I want, or is it what others expect me?
Yeah, they're great questions to ask. And that starts to reveal the pathway as to what it is that you really want.
And you mentioned about leadership programs that you kind of did them all, tried them all. What would you say are the biggest shortcoming in traditional leadership programs for, especially for women in corporate?
Yeah, so there's many corporate programs, leadership programs out there. There's women in leadership programs. The first piece is when you're in a work environment, they all say this is a safe space. Even when you get an executive coach through work, that's okay, you can be vulnerable. But there's always a level of hesitation there because I've been in leadership programs where it was said be vulnerable. And then 3 weeks later, a person who was in that room used what they learned about my vulnerabilities to throw me under the bus and worked out exactly how they could get their way with me. So one is often they're not a safe place to truly be vulnerable. So you limit the ability for you to transform. But the other, I guess, two main things I'd say about work courses and leadership programs is they look at work typically in isolation. So they don't recognize that how we do one thing is how we do everything. So yes, we talk about women leaning in and we're talking about women, taking up space and finding their voice, and all that is wonderful. But they often don't look at, well, what actually is going on at home that is stopping you from leaning in? What are the other facets of your life, whether it's your health or your relationships or the mental load that you're carrying? We can't just look at work through one lens and say, how are you showing up here? We have to take a more holistic view because women are juggling all the things. They're the emotional barometer of their household. They typically hold the bulk of the mental load. And without recognizing and acknowledging all of that, it's very one-sided. So that's one piece. And the other piece is that these traditional leadership programs don't go deep enough into what's really holding us back. So as women, we have a whole range of conditioning. We mentioned, what you should be doing as a mother, but also a lot of conditioning around traits like perfectionism and people pleasing. And we have these limiting beliefs that hold us back. And work will do, a 15-minute exercise on what those are. And they focus very much on the behavior. Here's how we shift things. But I have this beautiful formula that talks about our thoughts drive our feelings, which drives our behavior and gets us our results. If we don't start with our thoughts and we don't process our feelings, well, then no behavior change is ever going to be sustainable. It's going to be rely on willpower. It's going to be temporary. And all those habits are going to go back to how they were. People get a short-term band-aid. Sometimes they get some shift, but it's not very sustainable. I've had even clients who've come to me and said, Joe, I've just been through the work, women in leadership program. And she said, we sat there and we spent 3 hours on limiting beliefs and you spend 2 weeks on that topic. Is it any wonder? She said, I'm walking around the room going, no, that's the thing. That's the thing that's going to unlock everything. So they don't go deep enough. And I don't think they look more holistically enough at women, the lives that we lead, and everything that we're juggling in our world.
Yeah, and I want to just talk about vulnerability because this is really key. And at least from my perspective, I do allow women to be very vulnerable, both in group coaching that I do and in personal coaching. So there is an opportunity for you as a woman to be vulnerable, but maybe not in a setup that will include, as you mentioned, like maybe people that you don't feel that's going to serve you the best to be vulnerable. So I think it has also to be the right environment with really people that support each other. If it's a group program,
Mm.
either they're in the same company or different companies, but it can be attained, but maybe depending on kind of who attend this program.
Yeah, and I mean, a corporate buzzword that's been around for a few years is psychological safety.
Yeah.
Everyone's always talking about, creating a culture that's psychologically safe. And yes, that's true, and you need to be supported. But I think, to be honest, women also have to give themselves permission to be vulnerable, because so many of us don't like asking for help and think they have to be perfect and don't want anybody to see this other side of them. So much of what they do is rooted in fear. And that doesn't allow anybody else in. That doesn't allow this facade to drop of this is who I think I have to be. There's a lot of external validation. And so no one ever gets to see the real us, which is exhausting for one. But it can inherently also create this really interesting environment of mistrust where we put everybody else's needs ahead of our own, where we place value on other people's opinions more than our own. We ask other people what they think and don't trust our own judgment. And when we spend our lives looking outside of ourselves, we get to what I shared where I was before, this almost abandonment of self. And so there's an inherent, almost energetic mismatch where we're being vulnerable, but there's almost this question of, well, who are you? And that's a really interesting energetic space that so many of the women who come to work with me end up stepping into, is how do we actually fill you from the inside out first? And then
Yeah.
vulnerability becomes that much easier because that requires courage and it requires you to put down a lot of external perception and expectation.
What I found out, I lead the women ERG groups. So, and I also, was very involved in women ERGs when I was in corporate. And I think this is a wonderful space. I'm not saying it always works, but it's a wonderful space for companies to allow their women to really feel safe and feel vulnerable. And, the amount of intimacy those women can create with each other and being really vulnerable while feeling safe, as you mentioned, like psychological safety, like feeling really safe. No one is going to judge them. No one is going to hold anything against them. Is really beautiful, and it can be done. So I want to encourage, employers to invest in those activities. It's not just buzzwords. It really works.
Absolutely. And women need sisterhood. I know it's a bit of a cringe word, but we need community. We are
Yeah,
not designed to be lone wolves. We need to surround ourselves with other women who are on the same journey, because if we, particularly when we're doing things like taming our perfectionist or dealing with those limiting beliefs or putting down some of those good girl behaviors that we've been taught, we need to have role models as to what's another way for us to be. And that's where community and, as you said, those, women in business or various industries, networking groups are so crucial for us to really, bounce off each other.
absolutely. And I want to kind of shift gears into like your programs and kind of go a little bit deeper. Maybe, Joe, maybe you can kind of share about the specific challenges that are not really being addressed for women, and we can talk about them.
Yeah, so the specific challenges are along the lines of what I mentioned earlier in terms of I tie up the perfectionism, people pleasing, and procrastination as self-sabotage. So we don't have a good enough read on how we're sabotaging ourselves. I say often it's so many women who are burning out or who are not where they want to be are almost in the driver's seat of their life with their foot on the accelerator and one foot on the handbrake. And it's about taking off the handbrake. So where are you holding yourself back? Where are you sabotaging your success? So that's a really big part of what I do, is getting to the bottom of what that looks like. Another key piece of what I see is essential for us in terms of redefining success and becoming the woman that we were born to be, wherever that is in life, is really shifting our identity. I believe we need to do a lot of identity work. So many women are almost, I call them get stuff done people, or get shit done people, if we can use an expletive, GSDs. And that is where we're the workhorse. We get everything done. We say yes to everything. We have no boundaries. And we believe that our personal brand is based on that. And yet, being the go-to person, that can be a really big part of our identity. And yet it will completely hold us back. And it will stop us from really becoming the woman of influence that we know we're capable of being. And that ultimately, that identity shift is, I talk about one from going from being a woman who does things. So being from this identity of doing to an identity of being. So how do we make that identity shift? And it's tricky because we've been brought up as a generation of doers. And the more that we can be, the more we can own our power, the more we can find our voice, everything starts to shift for the better. So that's a very big part of that. So yeah, they're probably two of the biggest ones. I can keep expanding if you like, or you let me know if you want me to share any more.
Yeah, so I just want to touch based on the people pleasing and setting boundaries, because I think they go in hand. And I can share, like personally, like I was a people pleaser, and I'm still to some extent. And only when I found out that actually, I thought about it, and the reasons were I wanted to be likable. I wanted people to like me, and I thought that if I say yes to everything, I'll be likable. But then I realized, one day I realized that actually I don't have to be likable. I mean, not everyone has to like me. I want to be respected. And I think that for women, I mean, we need to maybe let go a little bit of, oh, I want everyone to love me, to like me, I want people to respect me as a great leader that I am. Being respected mean that, people, sometimes they will not like something that you say or do, but at least they will respect you as a professional. What is your take on that, Jo?
Yeah, I completely agree. And that people pleasing behavior is very, very dangerous, particularly as you move up the ranks. A lot of it comes from our conditioning. We were taught to not rock the boat, to keep everybody happy, whether that's your role in the family or often as females, regardless of regardless of location. I found that to be true across many, many different cultures for quite a long time. What I have seen can be the biggest shift in this. One is learning how to say no. It's a word that we all know how to say, but people pleasers really struggle to say it because of the meaning they make of it and because of all these things. But the shift, as you said, it's also really important for us to understand why we want to be liked. And ultimately that comes down to safety. Because as girls, we were told that, we have an aversion to conflict, unfortunately, biologically, as humans and as women. And so we live in fear that if somebody doesn't like us, then they're going to cast us out of the tribe and we're not going to be accepted, and therefore we're going to die, essentially, is what is the sort of the stacking that our brain does. And so it can feel like a matter of life and death if somebody doesn't like us. But we have to learn to override that biological primal programming and say that, this isn't a matter of life or death. And so many women are stuck in this trap of wanting to be nice, which is that I want you to like me. The irony is when you want someone to like you or you want to be nice, it's actually all about you. It's your fear of abandonment, or it's your fear of judgment, or it's your fear of what this means about you. If someone likes you, there must be something wrong with you because they don't like you. Whereas the mindset shift that I find to be really powerful, you use the word respected. It's 100% one of the mindset shifts. Another one is to focus on being kind. Because sometimes the kind thing to do is to say the thing. The kind thing to do is actually putting the other person in your relationship or interactions, whether that's at work or at home, is saying the thing, is calling the elephant in the room, is actually delivering the feedback. The kind way to deliver feedback is usually directly, to don't mince words, to say it. Whereas the nice thing is trying to sugarcoat it and not really say it in a way because you don't want them to not like you. It's actually inherently selfish. And the more we're able to put down that recognition that if I want them to like me, I'm actually living my life in fear. And to your point, say, I want them to respect me. I can be kind, but sometimes that means I'm going to deliver something that hurts. But there's a saying, we have to be cruel to be kind sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a big shift. This small, like, seems like a small thing, but when I realized, well, I don't have to worry about so much that people will like me, that was
Yeah.
a huge shift for me in the way I acted.
It's incredibly freeing. It changes so much behavior. There's so much compensatory behavior that we do when we're worried about someone liking me. It will completely shift the choice of language that you use. It has a huge impact on your influence and your ability to influence someone else. Because when you want them to like you, you will soften everything, you will shrink yourself, you won't actually be able to deliver anything with impact. And so the moment you release that worry, as you said, that fear, you actually step into your power. So wanting people to like you is a really big power leak. And most successful women who are in their full power, you will notice talk about words like respect, and they know that they're not for everybody. And that's okay. They know that everyone's not going to like them. And that's okay. It doesn't mean anything about them.
Absolutely. What's, Joe, one tip you can give women? Because obviously there's so much we can talk about and we cannot get it all in our conversation today. But maybe one thing that women can take away from today and start making a shift.
My biggest advice is to probably get to know yourself. The more we can understand our patterns, and my favorite tip, I guess you would say, is the most powerful question you can ask yourself is, what am I making that mean? So something happens and you ask yourself, what am I making that mean? That begins to unlock the depths of self awareness, because only once we've got the awareness from something are we ever able to make a change. So the more you can go, oh, I realized that I put the word just in that conversation. What am I making that mean? Or I felt that in my body. I retracted, or, oh, I'm a bit afraid right now. What am I making that mean? And when you start digging, that question can unlock all kinds of limiting beliefs. And from there, you can now put yourself in more an empowering place to say, well, I'm going to choose a different meaning. I'm now going to be able to shift my behavior and make a much more empowering meaning of that decision, that delivery, that feedback, whatever it is. I'm going to bring on that empowering meaning. And so that one question you can flip to use it to dig, but you can also use it as a motivator to really change your behavior moving forward.
That's wonderful. And tell us a little bit about your programs and how can women find you?
Yeah, so they can find me at balanceinstitute.com. So we have our 12-week signature program called Balance and Beyond, which is, as it suggests, is all about not finding just balance, getting out of burnout. But we want women to unlock what that looks like. How do they find this beautiful, extraordinary life where they are in their power, where they are not feeling guilty, where they are able to influence, and they've tamed all of those things that hold women back. So because we aren't a work specific program, we're holistic. Yes, you will find unshakable confidence at work, and yes, you will speak more powerfully and you'll have more influence, but you'll do that from this beautiful place of calm and of presence and of actually working out who you are in your life so that you can step more fully into all aspects. Because I want the world to get the best of every woman. I want their family to see the best of them. I want their career to be redefined in terms of what actually lights them up. But most importantly, I want women to actually find themselves again. And that's the great privilege that we get to do every single day here.
Absolutely. And I share with you the mission. And we want women to succeed and have unshakable confidence in themselves, like you mentioned, and live the life that they want under their terms.
Absolutely.
Not anyone else.
There are so many women out there. We need as many people on the cause as we can. So kudos to you, Limo, for being another woman in the arena with me, helping impact people and change lives, because there are so many women out there that need help. They've got to find the right guide for them at the right point in time when they need it. And yeah, then the world shifts one woman at a time.
Exactly. That's exactly what I say. I help one woman at a time. So, Joe, thank you so much for being here with me today. Really a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Joe. If you liked the episode, please share it with someone that you feel that's going to be helpful for, and subscribe to the podcast, share it with other women, I want to reach more women and help more women. So that's my mission. Help me fulfill my mission, please. And before you go, I have some exciting things to share with you for next week. So next week, in this podcast, From a Woman to a Leader, I have a pleasure to speak with Kimberly Liverdoor, and she is an operations specialist, a business consultant, and an author of the book She Defies 30 Powerful Stories of Overcoming. And her story is very inspiring. It's a story of resilience, of transformation, and taking control of your life despite the setbacks. And she had some really tough setbacks and challenges in her life. She was escaping an abusive relationship and rebuilt her career while battling autoimmune diseases. And I'll tell you something. If anyone, she proves that there is always a way forward. And, I want you to think about something before next week's episode. What is the biggest obstacle that you had? And what if I told you that the biggest obstacle in your life can actually be a foundation for your greatest success? So thank you so much for being with me and Joe today. Before you go, please subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and definitely you don't want to miss this inspiring episode. And if you enjoy this podcast, please review. It really helps more women find these stories and feel empowered. And let me know what you think, what topics you would like to hear about. You can comment, obviously, on this episode, but you can also reach out to me directly. So feel free to find me on LinkedIn. The handle is Limor Bergman, and connect with me. Send me messages. I want to hear from you. I want to help you and other women. So don't be shy. Just reach out and tell me what are your challenges and how can I help you and other women. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'll see you next week.